that's what he is. You know, even in his writing, he is engaged with anybody who's going to pick up his writing. He always, I remember him telling me once that he became a writer because when he went to, when he was called up, he refused a commission as an officer in the war. And so he went to some training camp and was working with recruits. And he was asked, he was one of the very few, quote-unquote, educated people who was a part of this kind of gang of young soldiers. And they cottoned on very quickly to the fact that he could write, or he could, you know, that he was literate. And they asked him if they could dictate their letters home to him. And so he was writing their letters to their sweethearts and their mothers and their fathers and their friends. And it's so evident, it's such a gesture. You know, it's really true when he says that as a writer, he's a listener. He's a passer of contraband. And yeah, so he's always in dialogue. I don't know that he really thinks of himself as ever not in dialogue. He's thoroughly engaged human being.
Yeah, I mean, talking with John, I mean, it's always collaboration, it's always thinking, it's always that. At the same time, I've made 2 films with him, other films, and in this one he wasn't at all involved in the editing. I mean, so in that sense, it wasn't a collaboration because we wanted to make a portrait, our portrait of him. And interestingly enough, perhaps the collaboration's finished when one of his reactions to seeing the film was to write a piece which is called Self-Portrait, which Tilda will read at the end of this session, I think.
Well, he did say, I mean, he really wanted to come to Berlin, but he was also fairly resistant to contributing to the discussions around the film, because I think he feels a little, you know, that, as Colin says, it's you know, we're his mirror, if you like. And so what he was going to do was to read what I've got in that envelope there, and because he's not well today, he's asked me to read it. And yeah, that's what he would have done. He would have given you a self-portrait.
Colin, I would like to know about this the song for politics, from the attitude that I felt. It was sort of a tribute to a television which doesn't exist anymore. It's black and white, but that's just technical. But this talking sessions, that has been something which made the life of television at a certain time, and that does not exist anymore. Was that something you clearly had in mind, that it comes over to that from that media point of view, and also coming from the media point of view to talking about politics, which intertwines?
I mean, it was very consciously modelled. I mean, the whole film is a little bit of a joke. But it was consciously modelled on a very famous programme which I watched as a child called the Brains Trust, where they would get 4 experts together and talk about questions of the day. And that was the same television that John came out of. So there was a conscious attempt to kind of do a kind of not a modern version of it, but to do that, and to do it in the town hall in Mercy, the tiny little town hall. So that was completely conscious. Yeah.
It's also a certain idea of politics that it happens in the town hall. So at the agora of the community.
Yeah, and then the instead of having, which was my original idea, an interminable, boring discussion of what went wrong with communism, we then had the better idea of getting some younger people together, and to have that communist heritage there, but simply as song, so that one actually could get the virtues of solidarity and fraternity, and without actually having to go into a kind of perhaps already well-known rehashes of what has to be left in the past.
I wanted to add that apart from kind of saying, I think it's also an experiment in friendliness effect, clearly, and it's also a kind of call for action because it's ostensibly political film, and it's defies that there's no story, there's no defies any structure, any obvious structure. So it tells about politics in a very simple and direct way, unlike many other, unlike sort of mainstream cinema, which has always been political in a way, by avoiding subjects, by assuming things which you might agree with. So this film doesn't pretend to be it doesn't hide anything. It's all there, and we talk about subjects which are important. I think it is a call for action because I think there should be more politics. We should talk about politics, but also make films about politics, and not hide it and not sweep it under the carpet.
You want to? But staying a bit with politics, I would like to know. I'm wondering. John Berger is, as you have pointed out, a very open, communicative, and he needs the interaction between people. But I can hardly imagine him as being sort of a member of a party, and I think is that also something his attitudes towards politics is quite different to what in representative democracy is politic meaning. Do you agree to that?
Well, I think eventually I'm trying to imagine what he would say, which is kind of an impossible task. But I do think it's worth remembering how important language is to him. That when he assesses political atmospheres, he's always attendant to what language is being used to corral and organize and alienate and disempower people, or to give people the fantasy that they have power. He's so attendant, he is such a writer, and he's so, words are so important to him, and the way in which they're the contraband that people pass back and forward between each other in order to communicate, which is so difficult on Earth. I think that's one of the reasons why it is difficult. I don't know what he would say about his ability to be a part of a party, but I imagine that that's got something to do with that difficulty, that he would always want to look a little closer at exactly what words are being put down, and so he's probably better on his own in that sense. He's on a kind of objectivity cloud, I think, as a thinker, and the way in which he uses language to translate his thoughts.
Maybe a last question. I was wondering when often the topic of time is mentioned in the film, and there's this wonderful sentence or idea of John saying presence is permanent presence, and he refers to internet, and that's not the point. I think he's one of the, in how I see him, is he's very much in all three time dimensions, so past, present, and future, and that's so fascinating. And I'm wondering how he manages not to get lost in this labyrinth of past, present, and future, and to make a very clear point from a strong humanistic human point.
I don't know what anybody else would say up here, but I would say this is why the idea of spring felt so compelling for us. He's so young. He's so eternally curious, and this is one of the reasons also why I wanted to place the children in the film, to show how he interacts with people of 16 or people of 8 or people of 3. He is so excited about the possibility of human interaction and so dedicated to the fact of human dignity. That's why he is, literally, and it's sad that he's, suffering human illness right now, but he is literally ageless. I mean, he's in his 90th year. It's kind of hard to believe when he throws a 16-year-old on the back of his bike, and very big bike, by the way, and heads off into Paris. But if it's not going to be John Berger, who better, basically, to take your daughter? He's the guy. He's just, he's evergreen. He's spring.
I mean, time is a center thing in his thinking, and also when he talks about the animals in the Spring film, he talks how animals kind of feel time, and it's always with him. I mean, he's always thinking about the past, the future, and the present, but the nice thing is he's not stuck in the past. I can repeat that all the time. That's, for me, the one thing. And that's what maybe keeps him so young, that he always believes in a better future. And don't leave it to the bad guys, our future.
It's true that actually when you think about the whole series, we talk about the past in the first film, and then we have a strange new time because spring is very much about timelessness. It's about the cycle, and then of course the present and the future. So actually we cover the whole spectrum.
There's small cycles like these, but there's the big cycle from the fathers to the mothers to the children. Am I not loud enough? Yeah, it's small cycles, big cycles. It's very Berger. It's very much a Berger thing. They are giving you signs. We have to stop, right?
No, not yet. Tilda, will you read the...
Yes, so I'm going to read this because John asked me to, and who am I to say no? It's a couple of pages, but it's his, so I think we're all up for it. Let me have a look. But never enough. Self-portrait. I have been writing for about 80 years. First letters, then poems and speeches, later stories and articles and books, now notes. The activity of writing has been a vital one for me. It helps me to make sense and continue. Writing, however, is an offshoot of something deeper and more general, our relationship with language as such. And the subject of these few notes is language. Let's begin by examining the activity of translating from one language to another. Most translations today are technological, whereas I'm referring to literary translations, the translation of texts which concern individual experience. The conventional view of what this involves proposes that the translator or translators study the words on one page in one language and then render them into another language on another page. This involves a so-called word-for-word translation and then an adaptation to respect and incorporate the linguistic tradition and rules of the second language, and finally another working over to recreate the equivalent of the voice of the original text. Many, perhaps most translations follow this procedure, and the results are worthy but second-rate. Why? Because true translation is not a binary affair between two languages, but a triangular affair. The third point of the triangle being what lay behind the words of the original text before it was written. True translation demands a return to the pre-verbal. One reads and rereads the words of the original text in order to penetrate through them, to reach, to touch the vision or experience which prompted them. One then gathers up what one has found there and takes this quivering, almost wordless thing and places it behind the language it needs to be translated into. And now, the principal task is to persuade the host language to take it in and welcome the thing which is waiting to be articulated. This practice reminds us that a language cannot be reduced to a dictionary or stock of words and phrases, nor can it be reduced to a warehouse of the works written in it. A spoken language is a body, a living creature, whose physiognomy is verbal and whose visceral functions are linguistic. And this creature's home is the inarticulate as well as the articulate. Consider the term mother tongue. In Russian, the term is rodnoy yazg, which means nearest or dearest tongue. At a pinch, one could call it darling tongue. Mother tongue is one's first language, first heard as an infant from the mouth of one's mother, hence the logic of the term. I mention it now because the creature of language which I'm trying to describe is undoubtedly feminine. I imagine its centre as a phonetic uterus. Within one mother tongue are all mother tongues, or, to put it another way, every mother tongue is universal. Chomsky has brilliantly demonstrated that all languages, not only verbal ones, have certain structures and procedures in common. And so, a mother tongue is related to, rhymes with, non-verbal languages, such as the languages of signs, of behaviour, of spatial accommodation. When I'm drawing, I try to unravel and transcribe a text of appearances which already has, I know, its indescribable but assured place in my mother tongue. Words, terms, phrases can be separated from the creature of their language and used as mere labels. They then become inert and empty. The repetitive use of acronyms is a simple example of this. Most mainline political discourse today is composed of words which, separated from any creature of language, are inert and dead. And such dead wordmongering wipes out memory and breeds a ruthless complacency. What has prompted me to write over the years is the hunch that something needs to be told, and that if I don't try to tell it, it risks not to be told. I picture myself as a stopgap man, rather than as a consequential professional writer. After I've written a few lines, I let the words slip back into the creature of their language, and there they are instantly recognised and greeted by a host of other words with whom they have an affinity of meaning, or of opposition, or of metaphor, or alliteration, or rhythm. I listen to their confabulation. Together, they are contesting the use to which I put the words I chose. They are questioning the roles I allotted them. So, I modify the lines, change a word or two, and submit them again. Another confabulation begins. And it goes on like this until there is a low murmur of provisional consent. Then I proceed to the next paragraph. Another confabulation begins. Others can place me as they like, as a writer. For myself, I'm a son of a bitch. And you can guess who the bitch is, no?
Tilda, thank you for reading this. We come to an end, although we could talk on forever. Not forever, but long time. Thank you. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Bartek, for being here. And for those of you who want to recall the conversation, it will be on the internet tomorrow on the website of the Berlinale. A nice evening or end of the afternoon, and hope to see you again soon in this theater.